Hi. In this episode, we'll talk about what's happening between the India and the UK in terms of the trade deal that they have signed recently. Now, remember that the India-UK trade deal was announced a few months back, and I think the travel of Prime Minister Modi to uh, London, on the outskirts of London, to Chequers, um, is symbolic because they wanted to sign this deal together to uh, signal that they have reached the final stages of the disagreements are sorted and final agreements have been reached in terms of how they want to pursue this deal over the course of the next decades. Because remember that this India UK, one of the most important aspects of this deal is that it takes a long horizon view of India and the UK relationship. It is, of course, under the aegis of the 2030 vision that that India and the UK have been operating under. Remember that the 2030 vision was actually 2030 roadmap and then changed to a vision um, because certain ingredients of India UK India UK roadmap of bilateral relationship were changed. Keir Starmer took over from the last Conservative government, and the change in focus had to be replicated in terms of how the policies. The policies reflected, although there's not much of a difference in terms of what India and the UK bilaterally want to achieve. Few key things. I think what this deal does really in terms of the symbolism. It is high in symbolism because remember India was simultaneously or is simultaneously negotiating another mega deal, trade deal with the United States, which is under negotiations. Many say it's on the verge of completion, but unless a final deal of some sort is announced, it's difficult to surmise where and at what stage the deal is. But certainly, there are certain red lines that India has drawn in terms of what sectors are to be opened and how much to the United States, just as I assume it had to the UK. Now, in terms of the taxation, was a major issue, a double taxation issue, etc. And tariff was a major issue. And given what's happening elsewhere in the world, particularly with the U.S. tariff on rest of the countries, now UK, remember, was the first country to speed ahead and sign a deal with the United States. Even in the case of the UK, which is an ally, the 10% baseline tariff remains from Donald Trump presidency, which makes it very difficult for countries to operate, and therefore the necessity to look for other partners around in the world to be able to strike meaningful deals for sectors which could face pressure as a result of some of these tariff pressures from the US. So I think you'll see a lot of countries, including the most dependent countries in the US, trying to reposition themselves on the trade spectrum. And as a result of this, you see that from both from India's side and from the UK side, there was a bit of an urgency to sign this deal. Now, in terms of the ingredients of the deal itself, there are various sectors that have been taken into account in terms of lowering down the tariff. Automobiles, again, takes a very breakdown and narrowed, a very breakdown and a long-term view of how these tariffs will be imposed and will be lessened over the course of the next decades and years. So automobiles are a major part. You have whiskey, tea, and a host of other things which will be reduced from both sides. Now, the UK, of course, stands to gain from the fact that there'll be more market opportunities, there'll be more job opportunities for UK residents inside that country. From India's perspective, there'll be greater market access for the UK, which means there'll be greater exports going out from India to the UK. Now, the downsides of how this could play out in the next decade is, of course, the timeline. I mean, it's a huge, long arc of long arc in terms of how this will play. But once, let's say, if there are governments in the UK and India which both continue some of these promises over the course of next decade, then I think within 6 or 7 years, some of these benefits will start percolating down to the levels of the economy in real sense. In the immediate term, of course, it's a great symbolism from India to sent across to the US to say that we are all countries, just like all countries. India is also positioning itself in terms of how it wants to view certain market access in other larger economies of the world, and I think that's more important in terms of where the timing of the India-UK deal. The ingredients are, of course, important from that perspective as well. You remember that steel and aluminum, etc., in many countries face tariff from Donald Trump presidency, and come August 1, Trump could send those peculiar letters of tariff letters to more countries, which means that the repercussions among other countries could also then uh, vary widely. So all of these put the India UK deal at a great time in history. Of course, needless to say that the implementation remains the key. But at the level of symbolism, it's also on a bilateral level, putting behind a lot of legacy issues between the two countries, that is India and the UK. Thank you.